Lately, I've noticed that the cleaning hasn't been as thorough as usual. There's a noticeable accumulation of dust in the corners. Considering you're at home throughout the day, it's important to ensure everything is done properly. If this continues and I find dust again, I may have to reconsider the access to your laptop. My husband Peter has become more distant ever since I started dedicating more time to my work as a cartoonist. When I'm buried under deadlines, he frequently complains about the household chores and sometimes insists that I redo them. He expects the cleaning to be impeccable because I'm at home, but he doesn't seem to understand that cartooning is more than just a hobby for me. It's my passion, and I'm not willing to give it up. Additionally, I've started to feel that Peter might be keeping something from me, and I can no longer overlook his secretive behavior. My name is Brenda. I'm 34 years old, and I work as a freelance animator. I create essay-style cartoons and manage to fit my work around the household chores. When Peter, who is now 36, and I got married 7 years ago, we had an agreement that I would be a full-time homemaker. 3 years into our marriage, I faced the profound loss of both my parents. As their only child, I inherited their house, and we moved in. Despite my responsibilities at home, I couldn't let go of my lifelong passion for drawing, a craft I've nurtured since my student days. I had a heart-to-heart with Peter, expressing how important my art is to me. I explained that while I was committed to our home, my true aspiration was to make a living from my cartoons. Initially, I only published independent comics, and Peter seemed to dismiss this as a mere hobby, but he reluctantly agreed to let me pursue it from home. Things took a promising turn about 5 months ago when a magazine editor discovered my work on my website. This led to a regular spot in the magazine, a 3-page, 4-panel cartoon feature every month. Since then, I've received more commissions for cartoons and illustrations, keeping me quite busy. However, when I shared my excitement and success with Peter, his response was disheartening. He coldly accused me of neglecting my duties as a housewife, suggesting that my cartooning should remain a sideline. He even implied that the money I was earning was insignificant, merely pocket money. Hurt by his words, I stood my ground. I told him, "I know you're not into cartoons, Peter, but being a cartoonist has always been my dream. It might seem small to you, but I'm getting paid for my work, and that makes me a professional. Please don't belittle what I do. Despite the challenges, I am determined to continue pursuing my passion, striving to balance both my career and my commitments at home." When I finally stood up for myself, Peter's reaction only intensified his displeasure. "You rely on me, and yet you talk back? If you're so unhappy, why don't you try earning more than me?" he retorted. I was taken aback. Typically, I earn about $1,000 a month, but I've limited my workload to accommodate him. Additionally, Peter often criticizes the state of our home, accusing me of slacking off on the cleaning and threatening, albeit not seriously, to sell my laptop if he sees dust again. His words hang over me like a threat, and even though I know he might not follow through, the fear it instills causes me to spend more time cleaning than meeting my professional deadlines. When I'm engrossed in work, Peter becomes even more difficult, pointing out every little household task that needs attention. The tension reached a peak one evening after a particularly busy day. Peter arrived home and, as usual, expected dinner immediately. He sat down, took a bite of the stew, and angrily exclaimed, "What's this? The carrot isn't cooked properly. Are you trying to upset me? I come home exhausted and this is what you serve?" Caught off guard while still processing a deadline I had just met, his sudden outburst yanked me back to the moment. As I turned towards him, he grabbed his glass of beer and splashed it over me. Shocked and drenched, I couldn't believe what had just happened. The incident was utterly unexpected, and the surprise of it struck me deeply. "I'm sorry, I must have been distracted while cooking," I replied, trying to keep the peace. "The rest of the meal should be fine. It's just the carrots that are off." In my rush, I had forgotten to parboil the carrots before adding them to the stew, a mistake uncharacteristic of me, especially since I had taken care to ensure that the potatoes were perfectly cooked. Such errors were not typical for me, and it stung to be confronted so harshly over a simple oversight. I felt terrible after the incident. It seemed Peter couldn't easily let go of my mistake. He expressed his frustration harshly. "It's frustrating to have a wife who can't handle basic household tasks. Maybe I shouldn't have married you." His words stung as he abruptly left the dining room. I followed him, trying to understand where he was going and why. "I need some space until you realize what you've done," he said sharply. I watched, stunned, as Peter packed a few essentials into a travel bag and left the house. I tried to reach him, following as far as I could, but he hailed a taxi at the nearest station and disappeared. Despite my numerous calls and texts, he didn't respond. Overwhelmed by the situation, I broke down in tears. It was at that moment that I felt a tap on my shoulder. Turning around, I saw Mr. Anthony, Peter's boss, and my former boss. We had worked together before Peter and I got married, and Mr. Anthony had been a mentor to me when I first joined the company. "Mr. Anthony, you smell like alcohol. Were you drinking while cooking?" I joked, trying to lighten the mood. "Hello, I hate to admit it, but I had a disagreement with Peter," he replied somberly. "That guy can be a bit arrogant sometimes. It's manageable when it's just work-related, but I can only imagine how frustrating it must be living with him." I felt a sense of relief sharing my troubles with someone who understood. Mr. Anthony nodded sympathetically, his trademark bright smile providing a moment of comfort, reminiscent of the support he had offered during tough times at work. We decided to grab a bite at a nearby diner to catch up further. "So, what's got you so upset?" he asked kindly. "Well, it's my fault. I messed up the cooking today. Tried making a stew, but the carrots weren't cooked well, and it upset Peter." Happens to the best of us. My wife does the same sometimes," Mr. Anthony reassured me, reminding me that such mishaps are universal and not as catastrophic as they seemed in the heat of the moment. As we sat there in the diner, Mr. Anthony's words helped me see things differently. When things go wrong, we just roll with it. Getting worked up doesn't help, you know. His perspective brought a smile to my face as we continued our conversation. No argument over drinks then?" he joked. "No, the beer smell. That's from Peter splashing it on me over the cooking mishap. I thought I'd dried it off at the station, but apparently not." I chuckled, recounting the absurdity of the situation. Mr. Anthony laughed in return, but his tone changed as he reflected on what I had said. "He splashed beer on you over a small cooking mistake? That doesn't sound like Peter at all. I never liked the guy much, but I never thought he'd do that to his wife." His voice carried a genuine indignation that oddly lifted my spirits. "Why did you come to the station? You look like you ran here in your apron," he asked, noticing my disheveled appearance. "Another issue with Peter," I sighed. "He called me lazy and stormed out, saying he wouldn't return until I reflected on my actions. I followed him, but he took a cab and left. I'm lost." Seeing my distress, Mr. Anthony's expression softened. "I can't say for sure what's going on, but I have a bad feeling. I'll look into Peter for you. You might want to check the house for anything he might have left behind," he suggested before we parted for the day. Following his advice, I searched through Peter's usual spots at home and found a hotel points card in his pants pocket. It had been recently used on a Saturday, a day he had claimed to be working. My suspicion grew as I remembered the GPS locator app we installed before getting married. I checked it and found Peter's location in an unexpected place, a popular tourist spot known for romantic getaways. Convinced he was with someone else, I called Mr. Anthony the next day. "Mr. Anthony, thank you for yesterday." "No problem. Is everything all right? Did Peter not show up for work today?" he asked. Mr. Anthony remained silent for a moment before exhaling heavily, sensing the gravity of the situation unfolding. "Yes, Peter is on paid leave for the next 5 days.
Mr. Anthony informed me over the phone. I suspected as much. I hate to say it, but he's probably... I understand. This helps clear things up. Thank you, I replied, my voice calm but the resolution within me firm. After ending the call, I took a deep breath and decided to leave the house. I had been contemplating my next steps for a while, preparing myself for what I might have to do if Peter ever betrayed me.
Once I felt ready, I picked up my phone again and dialed another number. "Hey, it's been a while," I greeted the person on the other end, who responded with cheerful enthusiasm. But as soon as I brought up Peter, they immediately expressed their support for me. Hanging up, I felt a wave of reassurance wash over me, bolstering my belief that things would soon take a turn for the better. The next day, I was not alone. Accompanied by a few trusted individuals, I headed to the location indicated by Peter's smartphone GPS. It led us to a resort hotel near a renowned tourist spot. According to the GPS, he was currently outside near the beach. Peter's face lost all color the moment he saw me. Seizing the opportunity, I quickly aimed my phone at him and captured several photos documenting him in the company of a young woman in her early 20s. I had been discreetly photographing them for the past half hour as Peter applied sunscreen to the woman, who was clad in a bikini. I patiently allowed them to swim, meticulously gathering irrefutable evidence of Peter's infidelity. Their carefree demeanor and blatant display of affection didn't shock me. Instead, I felt a sense of relief that they were providing solid proof. What truly shook Peter, besides seeing me, was the presence of my in-laws standing just behind me, both wearing stern expressions. "What's happening here, Peter?" I approached with a forced smile, causing him to stumble backward in the sand and land on his rear. My mother-in-law let out a disappointed sigh. How disgraceful, even for my son. "And who is this woman you've abandoned your wife for?" Her words cut through the air, sharp and accusing. At home, Peter tried to shift the blame hurriedly, pointing at me. "Is it fair to say she does absolutely nothing? Even though she occasionally skips cleaning, she handles the laundry, cooking, and dishes every day, doesn't she? Even I sometimes skip cleaning, and I detest laundry so much that I often leave it to your father." "That's because you had a part-time job, right? But it's different with Brenda," my mother-in-law interjected, her tone unwavering. "She's a stay-at-home wife who spends her time drawing and playing." These words fueled my father-in-law's frustration. "You're completely clueless," he exclaimed loudly, drawing the attention of onlookers. Some passers-by even seemed poised to record the scene with their smartphones. "Why don't we continue this discussion in a more appropriate setting?" I suggested, trying to de-escalate the public spectacle. Everyone agreed, and my in-laws and I headed to a nearby restaurant. Peter and the woman he was with changed from their swimsuits into casual clothes and joined us. Once seated, we listened as Peter tried to justify his actions. "I wanted Brenda to be a stay-at-home wife, but she picked up this useless hobby of drawing cartoons and neglected her housework. When she refuses to obey me, it's only natural for me to seek a replacement wife," Peter declared blatantly. Deborah, the woman with him, was quick to respond. "Wait, that's different from what you told me. You said you were troubled because of a stalker at your house and you wanted to escape that reality for a while," she countered. "I suggested going to the police, but you assured me the stalker would be caught soon. I wouldn't have gone out with you if I knew you had a wife," Deborah sobbed, her distress evident. It turned out she was a college student who had met Peter on a dating app, attracted to the allure of an older man. She had agreed to date him, only to realize the complexity of his situation later. Deborah was visibly upset, realizing she had been misled. "I'm sorry, Deborah. I will not contact Peter again. Consider this a lesson learned, and I'll be more careful in the future," she apologized sincerely, bowing deeply to both me and my in-laws. Before leaving, she showed us her phone screen as she deleted Peter's number, then left some money for her coffee on the table, and hurriedly exited the cafe. I turned my attention back to Peter,
who looked completely taken aback by Deborah's abrupt departure. It's only natural that I have my feelings and circumstances. I'm not some robot you can manipulate. Resorting to cheating just because things aren't going your way is despicable, I stated, my disappointment clear. Before Peter could muster a response, my father-in-law cut in, his tone stern and unyielding. You still seem too content, Peter, but let's be clear. Who's the one working and providing for Brenda? You should have more respect for me as the breadwinner.
Peter trembled with anger, but my father-in-law continued calmly, addressing him as one would a misbehaving child. You're acting like a child, throwing tantrums just because things aren't going your way. Learn to accept reality. There's nothing more to discuss. With that, my in-laws stood up, paid the bill, and headed to the register. Left alone with Peter, I found myself struggling to find the right words. Breaking the tense silence, I finally spoke up. Peter, I've been offered a serial comic strip in a magazine, I announced, watching his expression change to one of complete surprise. Oh, congratulations, he managed to say, his tone shifting. Because of this opportunity, I can no longer be the stay-at-home wife you envisioned. I'm sorry, but I'm tired of being disregarded and undervalued, I continued, gathering my resolve. Peter, I want a divorce. I'm sorry, but it's all become too much. You can pursue your desires, and I will pursue my comics. Peter pleaded, tears welling up in his eyes. I'll help with the housework. I won't be arrogant anymore. But I couldn't bring myself to look at him any longer. I'm sorry, but that's not the issue here, I said firmly. You looked down on me, didn't you? I believed marriage was about equality, but you saw yourself as superior because you were the provider. Maybe I did, but I've changed. I promise I won't make you suffer anymore. Please, let's not talk about breaking up, Peter begged, but my mind was made up. I've decided to sell the house we lived in. I have a relative who works in real estate, and they've agreed to buy it from me, I explained. There's still some paperwork and arrangements to finalize, so it won't happen immediately, but it'll be at a lower price than if we went through a broker. It's my house, and I have the right to do as I please with it. I want to end our relationship as soon as possible. I'm planning to leave tomorrow, and you should find somewhere else to stay as well, I added as I rose from my seat and headed for the exit. Unlike the day Peter left, he was now desperately chasing after me. However, when I got into the car, my father-in-law, who was behind the wheel, swiftly drove off. As I slammed the car door shut, I saw Peter running after us, tears streaming down his face, but soon he disappeared from view. Later, after his trip, and upon discovering the house empty of my belongings, Peter called me, his voice filled with anguish. I reluctantly answered the phone. Why did you sell the house? It was our home, wasn't it? Why are you saying such things? He asked desperately. It's the house I inherited from my parents, remember? I responded, my tone resolute yet weary from the emotional toll. But I should have some rights to it too, shouldn't I? Peter argued over the phone. However, the law doesn't automatically grant inheritance rights to spouses regarding property. If you understand, please leave the house as soon as possible. Expect a call from the lawyer regarding alimony and the divorce proceedings. Don't try to avoid it, I responded firmly before ending the call. Later, I learned that Peter faced repercussions at work. While employees aren't typically required to disclose the reasons for taking paid leave, Mr. Anthony, Peter's boss, criticized him for using his leave to travel with his mistress, particularly under the circumstances of betraying his wife. This scrutiny added to the strain Peter felt at work, where he began to feel ostracized by his colleagues and uncomfortable daily. Moreover, his relationship with his in-laws deteriorated further. They had completely cut ties with him, and when Peter attempted to return to their house, they turned him away. After paying the alimony, Peter's savings dwindled, and he began accumulating debt. He now resides alone in a modest apartment, struggling to manage household tasks and leading a somewhat chaotic life. Mr. Anthony shared these details with me, but I found myself devoid of any sympathy for Peter. Meanwhile, I settled into a tidy studio apartment,
focusing on my career. I began drafting for my serialized comic strip. It's an anthology style, drawing inspiration from various people's experiences. The next story I plan to illustrate revolves around marital infidelity, and I'm contemplating using Peter's situation as material. This creative outlet has provided me not only a means to express myself but also to process the events that unfolded in my personal life.